It has turned out to be an annus horribilis.
Nearly 30 years ago, the Queen had what she thought was her worst ever year. The separation of Charles and Diana.
With regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate.
The scandal of Sarah Ferguson and her toe-sucking friend. And the fire at her beloved Windsor Castle.
The blows just kept on coming.
There would never be another royal year like it, or would there? Tonight, royal insiders and experts reveal why the last 12 months may have been even worse for the Queen.
The Queen has had one of her toughest years ever in her very, very long reign.
From the scandal caused by Prince Andrew's friendship with paedophile Jeffrey Epstein and his disastrous TV interview.
He came over as aloof and cold and arrogant and smug.
To the rift between her grandsons.
We're certainly on different paths at the moment, but I will always be there for him, and as I know he'll always be there for me.
And the shock announcement that Harry and Meghan were effectively leaving the royal family.
She had about 10 minutes warning before the Sussexes dropped that bombshell.
They wanted to control the story themselves, but actually it was the worst thing they could possibly have done.
And as well as her husband's poor health, there was the car crash which brought a whole heap of unwanted headlines.
The Queen had to have put her foot down and said, "That's it, you can't drive anymore."
As if all that wasn't enough, the last year has seen the Queen, now well into her 90s, embroiled in political controversy around Brexit.
This is probably, I would say, the low point of the Queen's reign, having her people so divided over this issue.
With even her impartiality being called into question.
The 9/10 of the egg was, I think, on Boris Johnson's face, but maybe there was a bit of splatter on the palace's face as well.
Very clearly, she would have been very displeased with Johnson as a result.
Throughout it all, the Queen has remained steadfast and stoic, as each scandal and controversy has battered her beleaguered clan, but at huge personal cost.
The past year has absolutely taken its toll on her. It has been her second annus horribilis.
May 2018. The wedding of Prince Harry and Meghan Markle captivated the whole country and an audience of billions around the world.
The weather was stunning. It was the most glorious, beautiful English day. We saw a young couple who were so happy. Harry at last had found someone who he loved and loved him. Everything was beautiful about it.
To be at Harry and Meghan's wedding was absolutely amazing. The energy was electric and everybody was so excited. Everybody was in a party mood, a real party mood.
It was a day of joy around the country. And for the royal family, it seemed as though everything was happy and glorious.
It was a moment of national celebration. The royal family were more popular than ever. I think there was so much excitement about this young, beautiful, talented American actress marrying into the royal family. It felt very much like a real leap for the monarchy.
For the Queen, she's just so happy to be surrounded by her family, so proud. Everything's going really well.
The Queen looked resplendent. It was the biggest royal wedding since William and Kate's. I think there was a huge amount of goodwill towards the couple.
Harry's decision to marry American divorcee Meghan was a sign the monarchy was finally changing with the times.
Harry and Meghan's wedding was so multicultural, so diverse, and I just felt like, wow, something's changed. And I think, actually, the entire British public felt like this too.
Suddenly, there were a lot more people who felt connected to the royal family. It looked as if it was finally putting to bed any question that they were too pale, male and stale.
There was a great sense of optimism and hope and positivity, and a feeling that the monarchy particularly was progressing, it was moving forwards. So there was a lot riding on the Sussexes and this unity, because it was a good thing for the country, it was a good thing for the royal family.
2018 brought more good news for the Queen and the royal family. And another wedding at Windsor, when Prince Andrew's daughter Eugenie tied the knot. And William and Kate had their third child, Louis.
William's happily married. Meghan and Harry are happily married. Eugenie, it's all looking so good.
The so-called Fab Four of Harry and Meghan, William and Kate, seemed to be a team which might just take the monarchy into a bright and trouble-free future.
We're stuck together for the rest of our lives, so...
This is true.
Togetherness at its
Togetherness,
finest, really.
yeah.
The Queen's whole outlook is all about securing the future of the monarchy. And of course, that means getting the younger members of the royal family married off, married successfully, having babies. So she must have been incredibly satisfied at the end of that year. Very happy year for her.
In 2018, it did all look so good. It looked as if the royal family had absolutely finally come through to a clear path ahead, and that the changing times were really only seeing them growing in strength.
I think the Queen, she kind of is thinking, okay, I've got these young royals in place who can start taking on more responsibility. I can just kind of take it all in and enjoy the rest of my life calmly. So we thought.
2018 had been a triumph for the royal family. But they couldn't have foreseen that just a few days into the following year, things would start to go badly wrong. It all began on this road in Norfolk, and a car crash involving the then 97-year-old Prince Philip.
Prince Philip was driving out from the Sandringham estate, crossing a very busy main road, and the sun was very low, and he didn't see a car coming, and he pulled out, and the car hit him on the side, and it turned over his heavy Range Rover, and it landed up on the other side of the road, upside down.
He was taken out of the car, and he didn't know where he was, I was told, and that he was very, very, very shocked, as indeed he would be. It was a very scary event.
Prince Philip emerged unscathed. A 9-month-old baby in the other car was also unhurt, although the driver and passenger needed treatment.
He'd been across that road many, many times. The Queen would have been very annoyed with her husband.
But to seemingly add insult to injury, just 48 hours later, there was more controversy. The Duke of Edinburgh was photographed driving once again, this time not wearing a seatbelt.
The images of Prince Philip not only back behind the wheel days after the crash, but without a seatbelt. The Queen, her advisors, they will absolutely have known that was going to send out all the wrong messages.
Yet even that wasn't the end of the story. One of the crash victims claimed she hadn't received an apology.
We heard things that the woman who was injured in it, no one reached out to her, no one asked if she was okay. If you're going to be involved in a car crash and you're a member of the royal family, I think the first thing you need to do is to make sure you get your PR right about that. And clearly that was a bit of a disaster for the royal family.
Of course, he's the Queen's husband, and we hold members of the royal family to a higher standard than what we would maybe, our peers. So for him to not have apologised is a bad call on his part.
The palace said that private contact had been made. And days later, there was a letter of apology. But the barrage of bad headlines meant the Queen and her advisors were under huge pressure to act. 3 weeks after the crash, Prince Philip announced he was giving up his driving licence.
It was absolutely essential that, despite his famously cantankerous temperament at times, that it was made clear to the Duke that it was not a good idea that he continued to drive, and the Queen undoubtedly was the obvious person to make this point and make it firmly.
The Queen had to have put her foot down and said, that's it. I think she's quite serious and strict when it comes to negative press about her family. What's the quickest way I can get you out of the headline? Oh, okay, I'm gonna tell you can't drive anymore.
For the Duke and the Queen, it was a difficult start to the year.
Prince Philip is a very proud man and has had to endure playing second fiddle to his wife for the last nearly 70 years. And I think being told by the palace that the time had come for him to admit defeat and to stop driving and in effect stop being an independent person, I think was very, very difficult for him emotionally and difficult for the Queen.
The Queen's decision to encourage Prince Philip to give up driving came less than 18 months after he retired from official duties, leaving her to soldier on in public alone.
I think it was a real changing moment when Prince Philip stepped back from doing royal duties. It's completely understandable to all of us because he was in his late 90s. But for the Queen, he was her rock and he was very dutiful for her.
It must have been quite a transition for the Queen to have to carry out engagements on her own. We were always so used to seeing the Duke of Edinburgh, not by her side, always one step behind her, but very much in that role of a consort, in that supportive role. And he had done many, many years of great service for her, for the country, and she felt that more than anyone else, he had earned his retirement.
To add to the Queen's worries, the Duke's health was increasingly fragile.
Prince Philip has had a series of health scares. I mean, we read about him going in and out of hospital.
By the end of 2019, Prince Philip was spending his days at Sandringham, away from the Queen.
This was a huge change which did leave the Queen on her own, both physically but also taking all those very, very important decisions, particularly about internal family issues, pretty much on her own.
2019 didn't start well for the Queen and her family. But coming up, how Prince Andrew's friendship with Jeffrey Epstein would become one of the biggest ever royal scandals.
It is what they call a car crash of an interview.
You're asking me to speculate on things that I just don't know about.
If he didn't think that what he was doing was damaging to the Queen, it's simply obvious that he's an idiot.
In 2018 had been rosy for the royal family. But 2019 would be an extraordinary year of family turmoil.
It's interesting for historians of the future. The Annus Horribilis is always seen as 1992, but I think that 2019 will be seen as a bigger Annus Horribilis, and one big reason for that is Prince Andrew.
The Queen's third eldest child was about to be caught up in the scandal of royal scandals due to his long-standing links to American financier Jeffrey Epstein, a convicted paedophile and alleged sex trafficker.
We do have to take on board just how bad the Epstein thing is. To have a prince of the realm, the Queen's second son, associated so closely with someone convicted of Epstein's crimes, to have the words prince and paedophile mentioned in the same sentence is appalling. And this is something the royal family have not had to face before.
The Prince's association with Epstein began over 20 years ago, when he was introduced to the multi-millionaire hedge fund manager through Ghislaine Maxwell.
He was rather bowled over by this man who seemed to know everyone. He didn't see that he was being used by this very seedy man who wanted to have Prince Andrew on his arm for parties and a friendship.
Prince Andrew was alleged to have had sex with one of Epstein's teenage trafficking victims.
Senior royal favourite son of the Queen's involved with an American paedophile. The story couldn't have been worse.
Sources close to Prince Andrew claim the photo was fake, and he strenuously claims to have no recollection of meeting the victim. Some royal insiders believe he also assured the Queen there was no truth in the rumours.
Andrew had spoken with the Queen about the story. He had assured her that he was innocent of any of the allegations against him. And as far as the Queen is concerned, this is her son. She believes him.
Did you recover from this, sir?
But this was one scandal that wouldn't go away. After Epstein committed suicide in the summer of 2019, Prince Andrew's name was dragged back into the controversy.
They always say, never explain, never complain, and that has held them in good stead when a lot of stories have been swirling around because you think that'll just die down. Andrew clearly didn't think it was going to die down.
And it didn't die down. With growing pressure from the media, the public, and questions around his own behaviour, Prince Andrew decided something had to be done.
He's still not been convicted of any crime, so we can't say he is a criminal. He maintains he's innocent. This is ruining his life. This is clouding everything he does. So he decides, with remarkable stupidity, to give an interview to Newsnight and put his case forward.
Andrew sat down to give one of the most extraordinary interviews of all time to a BBC TV audience of millions. He hoped it would turn public opinion, and he even chose to do it in Buckingham Palace itself.
There were so many toe-curling moments of that interview with Emily Maitlis on Newsnight.
She described dancing with you and you profusely sweating, and that she went on to have bath, possibly.
There's a slight problem with the sweating because I have a peculiar medical condition, which is that I don't sweat, or I didn't sweat at the time.
He said some crazy things. He said, well, I never met this girl in question. I was actually with Beatrice in the Pizza Express in Woking. I mean, you couldn't make it up.
I'd taken Beatrice to a Pizza Express in Woking for a party at I suppose, sort of 4 or 5 in the afternoon.
Why would you remember a Pizza Express birthday and being at home?
Because going to Pizza Express in Woking is an unusual thing for me to do.
I was particularly shocked when Andrew was asked by Emily Maitlis, did you see trafficked women in the palaces? He said, well, I'm used to staff, as if, you know, courtiers and secretaries and housemaids were the same as trafficked teenagers.
I don't wish to appear grand, but there were a lot of people who were walking around Jeffrey Epstein's house. As far as I was aware, they were staff. They were people that were working for him or doing things.
But you'd notice if there were hundreds of underage girls in Buckingham Palace,
God.
wouldn't you?
But you would notice if there were hundreds of underage girls in Jeffrey's house. Wasn't there. Not when I was there.
He came over as aloof and cold and arrogant and smug.
Am I right in thinking you threw a birthday party for Epstein's girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, at Sandringham?
No, it was a shooting weekend.
A shooting weekend?
Just a straightforward shooting weekend.
It was the arrogance of saying it wasn't a really big party with Jeffrey Epstein. It was a straightforward shooting weekend, as if that's the equivalent of having a quick cup of tea with somebody who you barely know.
To say that he couldn't regret meeting the deceased convicted paedophile Epstein was almost unbelievable.
Do you regret the whole friendship with Epstein?
Now, still not. And the reason being is that the people that I met and the opportunities that I was given to learn, either by him or because of him, were actually very useful.
The whole thing was utterly grotesque, but what made it even more bizarre was that Andrew thought it had gone well.
It had not gone well. The fallout from the broadcast was huge. The Queen, who had reportedly only been told about the interview after it was set up, was reeling.
If he didn't think that what he was doing was damaging to the Queen, it's simply obvious that he's an idiot. It is so patently, painfully obvious that it must be causing great grief and distress to his mother.
Once again, the Queen had to take a difficult personal decision for the good of the monarchy and her country.
The Queen and her advisors will be very aware that the Andrew situation needed to be dealt with swiftly, and it was. We saw very decisive leadership on the Queen's part. There really was no option but for Andrew to step down. And as a mother, that must have been very difficult for the Queen. You know, Andrew's long been regarded as her favourite son, but for her to have to tell him, this is it, you're going to have to step down from public life, essentially take an early retirement, must have been difficult, but duty has always come before self. Duty has always been more important than anything else to the Queen.
Things still aren't over for Prince Andrew. The FBI investigation will go on for some time yet.
I just don't think it's a story that's going to die. And there may be a court case, and there may be a court case in which they might suggest that he should give evidence.
The idea that Prince Andrew might appear in court if he does end up speaking to the authorities is the worst possible scenario for the royal family. So if Andrew does end up in court, that could mean that 2019 might have been a bad year, but at that point will turn that very, very moment into the worst of the Queen's reign, I suspect.
But there was more heartache ahead for the Queen, in what was quickly becoming her new annus horribilis.
I think the Queen is very saddened by the bad blood between William and Harry.
We're talking about a breakup of that unanimity, and that will be damaging for the stability and for the future of the monarchy.
In 2019 saw the Queen face one of her most challenging years ever.
In the last year and a half, things have gone badly wrong. It's a very difficult period for the royals.
I think the Queen is quite worried about the impact 2019 will have had on her legacy.
As the longest reigning monarch in British history and head of the Commonwealth, the Queen has had to endure some difficult moments.
In the course of her long reign, she's had to deal with other times of crisis. Of course, she grew up in the Second World War.
She has been through an abdication. She has been through 1997 and the death of Diana, and the moment where the nation really did appear to turn against the monarchy.
For Queen Elizabeth personally, one year had stood out above the rest as her self-proclaimed most horrible.
It has turned out to be an annus horribilis. I suspect that I'm not alone in thinking it so.
Annus horribilis means, literally in Latin, a horrible year, a bad year, and the Queen coined it in a speech that she gave about 1992, which had been a very hard year for her.
1992 is not a year on which I shall look back with undiluted pleasure.
And I think that was probably her greatest understatement. Absolutely an awful year for the Queen. Very rare to hear her speak about something in such personal terms.
I sometimes wonder how future generations will judge the events of this tumultuous year.
Of course, she was talking about her personal year. She was talking about her family.
Like 2019, 1992 was a year in which the Queen was confronted by both public scandals and personal crises. She also forged her reputation for showing great stoicism in the face of adversity.
It was extraordinary because the blows just kept on coming. It was almost one crisis a month.
3 of her children in 1 year decided to end their marriages, and I think the Queen was very, very shaken by that.
The first one was the Princess Royal, who divorced her husband, Captain Mark Phillips. He hardly knew what was happening. It all happened so quickly. By the end of the year, she'd remarried.
And then the Duke and Duchess of York, obviously they were then going through difficult times.
And then, of course, John Major announced in the House of Commons the worst thing.
It is announced from Buckingham Palace that, with regret, the Prince and Princess of Wales have decided to separate. This decision has been reached amicably, and they will both to continue to participate fully in the upbringing of their children.
At the time, I think, what on earth would the Queen make of this? Because it was her eldest son and technically the future King and Queen separating. I mean, talk about constitutional crises. I mean, that really was a crisis there and then.
But these personal family problems were suddenly being laid bare for all the world to see.
I mean, the whole of 1992 was tabloid central because it was the War of the Waleses. It was Diana doing something, Charles doing something.
For the Queen, it was incredibly difficult. The scandal and the gossip all over the world.
With the situation spiralling, the Queen had to intervene for the good of the reputation of the monarchy. She took the unusual step of publicly urging the warring couple, who had until now only separated, to officially divorce.
There's only one Prince of Wales, and I think he's the future king, and you don't expect this to happen.
I think the Queen is made of incredibly strong stuff. She has weathered many, many crises before during her reign. But I think the ones that really hurt and the ones that take longer to recover from are the ones that are caused by members of her own family.
But it wasn't just Charles and Diana. In the summer of '92, as in 2019, the Queen had to deal with a scandal in the House of York.
Then, of course, the whole, I can barely even say those words, but the toe thing. I mean, just...
One of the most grotesquely gruesome images in the history of the royal family was in 1992 when Sarah Ferguson was having her toes sucked by her financial advisor, so-called John Brown.
And then, to make matters even more worse, she had to confront the Queen and say, Mum, I am just so sorry. And the Queen was furious.
The Queen had spent the year watching her children and their partners splashed across the front pages for all the wrong reasons. But then, towards the end of her horrible year, disaster struck Her Majesty right on her doorstep.
You have all this happening to your immediate family, not just your grandchildren, just to your immediate family. 3 out of 4 of your children, and all of a sudden, Windsor Castle and the Great Fire. It was close to her heart. It was her home, and also it's history. It's, she's responsible living in Windsor Castle for hundreds of years of history, and to see some of that go up in smoke would be heart-wrenching for anybody, and in particular the Queen.
The cost of repairing the damage came to over £36 million. The Queen once again put duty first, agreeing to open up her home, Buckingham Palace, to the public in order to help cover the cost. (2019), and the Queen was once again facing an annus horribilis. As well as being forced to intervene in the Prince Andrew scandal, the Queen was having to deal with trouble amongst the younger royals. After making a triumphant debut when Meghan joined the fold, whispers had begun to spread that not all was right with the so-called Fab Four.
for a lot of people, you know, we envisioned the Fab Four sticking together, and you know, they would go to events together and smiling and happy and joking around, and the pictures were there, and everybody just ate them up and loved it.
Catherine, Harry, and I are delighted to be here this morning, and we're particularly happy to be at our first Royal Foundation event with Meghan. Today.
And then there was a bit of a turning point, sort of rumours dripping out that behind the scenes, things hadn't actually been as picture perfect as they'd been presented. Rumours that really hinted that there was perhaps another narrative behind all of this.
There was a serious rift developing between the princes.
And people started to ask questions. What's happening here? What's happening with the Fab Four? They're not as fabulous as we thought they were. And there's a rift between the brothers. And all of a sudden, shock, they're stepping away from, you know, Kensington Royal. They're going to move to Windsor, and they're going to start their lives there, and they're separating themselves.
The whole idea of the Fab Four was completely impractical, because if you marry into a family and you live next door to your in-laws and you inhabit the same offices and you use the same charity, there's not very much left for independence.
Do you ever have disagreements about things?
Oh, yes.
I think one of the problems with William and Kate and Harry and Meghan is that not only are their futures totally different, but also as personalities, they, as couples, are very, very different. And Harry has certainly changed, and I think that the Queen will have found this something that is very difficult for her to appreciate.
We're talking about a breakup of that unanimity and of that being one family pulling in the same direction, and that will be damaging for the stability and for the future of the monarchy, I'm sure, as far as the Queen sees it, and does put the family in a precarious position.
In October of that year, whilst on a tour of Southern Africa, Harry gave a rare TV interview. He finally opened up about his relationship with William.
There's been a lot of talk in the press about rifts with your brother. How much of that is true?
Part of this role and part of this job and this family being under the pressure that it's under, inevitably, you know, stuff happens. But look, we're brothers. We'll always be brothers. We're certainly on different paths at the moment, but I will always be there for him, and as I know, he'll always be there for me.
The brothers, who everyone had assumed would be united forever, were drifting further and further apart.
This public rift between William and Harry, I think the public feel it quite deeply, actually, because we were all quite invested in both the princes.
I think one crucial aspect of the Harry and William situation is that the country over-romanticised them. They saw those two little boys walking behind their mother's coffin in 1997, and everyone's heart broke. As a consequence, really, I think, to make up for the fact of how painful we thought perhaps what we'd done to them was, we wanted them to be best friends forever and ever.
How much inter-service rivalry is there between you two?
None at all.
No, not at all, really.
I mean, everyone knows the Army's better than the RAF.
I'm an Cavalry boy anyway, so it's fine. There's some good bands between Army pilots and RAF pilots, obviously, as well. And the Naval pilots just, you know, in the background, they didn't do anything. So.
Then in December came the announcement that Harry would be spending Christmas in Canada with Meghan and Archie instead of Sandringham. The only other time Harry had missed Christmas with the Queen was when he served in Afghanistan.
I think probably the Queen is very saddened by bad blood between William and Harry. The Queen, she doesn't get too involved with this kind of family, otherwise she'd be sort of involved the whole time, wouldn't she?
As the year came to an end, just like in 1992, the Queen candidly expressed her feelings about the past 12 months.
The path, of course, is not always smooth,
and may at times this year have felt quite bumpy, but small steps can make a world of difference. And as we all look forward to the start of a new decade, it's worth remembering that it is often the small steps, not the giant leaps, that bring about the most lasting change.
The Queen describes the last year in her Christmas speech as bumpy, and without a doubt, it has been tumultuous, it's been turbulent. I think in many ways it has been her second Annus Horribilis.
Most people took it to mean that it was an acknowledgement of the royal difficulties that year.
I think she was understating how bad last year was.
It does seem an extraordinarily bad luck for a woman in her 90s.
But any hopes of a quiet, easier 2020 were not to be. The growing distance between Harry and Meghan and the rest of the family was about to get even greater.
It's not enough to just survive something, right? Like, that's not the point of life. You've got to thrive, you've got to feel happy.
They wanted to control the story themselves, but actually it was worse than they could possibly have done.
For the Queen and the royal family, the last year has been one of controversy and crisis. And just when it seemed things couldn't get any worse, Harry and Meghan dropped a devastating bombshell. The couple posted a statement online announcing their intention to step back as senior royals and seek a progressive new role within the family.
They put this statement out, and it shocks everybody. The Queen was definitely blindsided by this statement.
It was unprecedented. These were two of the most popular members of the royal family.
Harry and Meghan said they wanted to become financially independent, but retain many of their other royal trappings.
We're gonna have our cake and eat it too. We're gonna stay being dutiful to the Queen. We're gonna have a progressive new role within the royal family, but we're gonna become financially independent.
The Queen knew that at some point the couple were hoping to go it alone. But before their new role had been agreed with the palace, the Sussexes' decision to go public seemed to come as a huge shock to her.
What she didn't know was the actual statement they would release. Nobody was told that, just came out.
Nothing had actually been signed off, nothing had been agreed.
The Queen will have been caught off guard. She had about 10 minutes warning before the Sussexes dropped that bombshell.
Rumours had been swirling that the couple were considering a move abroad. Now, they feared that someone at the palace was leaking stories to the press.
A newspaper got a hold of the information, and they were going to break the story first. So we've heard that Harry and Meghan put that statement out before the newspapers could get a hold of it.
They wanted to control the story themselves, and that was their way of doing so. But actually, it was the worst thing they could possibly have done.
The news was all the more shocking because Harry had always enjoyed a close relationship with the Queen.
She's always had a soft spot for Harry. Whatever controversies Harry has landed himself in, from, exposing himself in Vegas to, wearing a Nazi costume in his youth, she's always stood by him.
The Queen was even willing to appear in this humorous promotional video for Harry's passion project, the Invictus Games.
So we like to watch it together?
Yes.
Let's have a look.
Hey, Prince Harry, remember when you told us to bring it at the Invictus Games?
Careful what you wish for.
Oh, really? Please.
Boom.
Harry is a sort of favourite grandchild, or he has been up to now. Things might have changed a bit.
I was told by very, very good sources that the relationship between Harry and his grandmother had come under pressure.
Just 18 months after that day of national celebration, the fairy tale seemed to be over. Meghan had clearly found royal life, the palace culture, and the tabloid press intensely difficult. Harry said he was determined to do all he could to prevent what happened to his mother being repeated. The couple opened up to Tom Bradby in this revealing ITV documentary.
When I first met my now husband, My friends were really happy because I was so happy, but my British friend said to me, I'm sure he's great, but you shouldn't do it because the British tabloids will destroy your life. And I very naively, I'm American, we don't have that there. What are you talking about? That doesn't make any sense. I'm not in tabloids. I didn't get it.
For me and for my wife, you know, of course there's a lot of stuff that hurts, especially when the majority of it is untrue. I will not be bullied into playing a game that killed my mum.
What Harry starts to feel is that he is fighting on his wife's behalf and no one is helping him.
So can you put up with this?
Yeah, well, I guess, and also thank you for asking, because not many people have asked if I'm okay. I've said for a long time to H, that's what we call him.
Yeah.
It's not enough to just survive something, right? Like, that's not the point of life. You've got to thrive.
One person who knows how difficult it can be to marry into the British ruling class is American-born aristocrat Julie Montague.
For Meghan and Harry to be so open is quite extraordinary and actually quite unroyal. I mean, it's very American, don't get me wrong, but it's very unroyal. You know, the Queen Mother's motto was always, never complain, never explain. And now, all of a sudden, we see Harry and Meghan ripping that up, throwing it by the wayside and saying, no, actually, we are going to tell you exactly how we feel and we're not happy.
There was a feeling that the Queen had done everything she could to accommodate the couple, but that they hadn't been entirely respectful of her during that process.
By the time Christmas came around, both Harry and Meghan were notably absent.
We saw that at the Queen's Christmas broadcast with the very careful positioning of those photographs on her desk. Prince Harry is not there. I think what we're seeing is the palace project the image of the future of the House of Windsor.
We do know that it was before Christmas that Harry had voiced some concerns, but he was told to go away, come back with a solid plan, solid suggestions of what they wanted and how they thought things could work. And that's not what they did.
Barely days into 2020, Harry and Meghan released that statement, revealing their intentions.
They saw a future of a sort of half in, half out, where they would continue some royal duties, but they would be abroad and they would be independent.
Hours later, the palace released its own statement, which said that negotiations with the couple were ongoing.
The palace really made it very clear that it wasn't quite as clean-cut as the Sussexes had outlined on their sparkling new website.
Some insiders saw it as a chance for the family to reach a much-needed compromise.
For one brief shining moment, I thought this could be the best of all possible worlds for everybody. They'd get some relief from their obvious unhappiness. The royal family would get a little bit more towards the slimmed down kind of monarchy that Prince Charles wanted. Instead, it's turned toxic. Toxic really, I think, for everyone involved.
For the Queen, it would also have presented a painful choice between her duty to the nation and her love of family.
Behind the scenes, we were being briefed that actually the Queen was rather hurt.
To treat the Queen in that way was ill-judged and extremely insensitive.
The Queen would find Harry's decision to cut ties with the royal family something she probably just simply can't relate to. That idea of abandoning duty, of just giving up, is just something that would never cross her mind.
The Queen heard the news, absorbed the news, and then called a summit at Sandringham. It all happened incredibly quickly.
2 days after the announcement, as Meghan flew back to Canada, Harry went to the emergency meeting at Sandringham. It was down to the Queen to try and keep her family together.
The Queen was present with her private secretary, the Prince of Wales, the Duke of Sussex and the Duke of Cambridge.
Now, the Queen has two hats to wear, and that's one of monarch and one of grandmother. Well, who turns up at the meeting? Is it the Queen or is it Granny?
At the meeting, Harry and the Queen discussed the couple's desire for partial independence.
The Queen said, OK, fine, I understand. Let's try and do something about it, but don't push me too hard. Just, just relax a little bit. But of course, their machine goes at 1,000 miles an hour and the machine of the monarchy goes slowly. But it did go quickly in this case.
After the meeting, the Queen made clear she supported Harry and Meghan's wishes, but stressed that their future role hadn't been resolved. Dutiful monarch, caring grandmother.
This was far more complicated, needed a lot more time, and that all pointed to all was not well behind the scenes. The Sussexes clearly had one idea of what was going on, the Queen had another.
And the next day, Harry left for Canada.
A week later, the Queen released a second statement. This one, far more definitive than the last. She said Harry, Meghan and Archie would always be much loved, but she supported their wish for more independence.
The Queen very much wanted to help them, but as they wouldn't bend and they wanted everything their way and they couldn't see any way out, she decided that it would be a hard Brexit.
The Queen had to put her role as a grandmother to one side and put the monarchy first. Harry and Meghan will no longer receive money from the sovereign grant and won't be using their HRH titles or the Sussex Royal brand name.
You are either in the royal family or you are out, and this idea of being financially independent was simply not workable.
The negotiations are done. The Queen drew a hard line. They're gone.
Many royal observers believe that, not for the first time, the Queen has put country before family. Like Andrew, Harry was effectively fired from the firm.
I think Queen Elizabeth II, and in many ways this is what we all respect about her, is someone who, when push comes to shove, will put the welfare, as she sees it, of the monarchy above that of anyone else, herself or her beloved grandson included.
The palace also announced that the royal family would review the new arrangements in 1 year's time.
Putting that 12-month review in place, goes to show you that the Queen will be watching them like a hawk. She will want to see everything that they're doing, what they're making money from, and how it's affecting the royal family. So there must be some concern from the Queen about what their intentions are.
With Meghan and Harry preparing for a future on the other side of the Atlantic, the Queen, well into her 90s, will have to adjust to life without Harry and her youngest great-grandson.
I think the Queen probably hopes that she will get to see her grandson, that she will continue to have a close relationship with Harry. It has always been a close friendship with Harry. It's probably a time of great sadness for her that she knows she will see less of them. I think it's absolutely why she's made sure that they've got Frogmore Cottage, which is in her back garden, so that when they are home, she won't be too far away.
The Queen's gone through so much in her reign that this is just another thing that she will keep calm and carry on through. I think the Queen is ready to move on.
"2019 was devastating for royal family unity. But it was also the year the Queen got drawn into a full-blown constitutional crisis.
Suddenly, she was at the centre of politics, which is somewhere she never wants to be.
The flames of Brexit were licking around Buckingham Palace itself.
Brexit, one of the biggest political issues the Queen has encountered in more than 65 years on the throne.
There's a political earthquake going to happen in this country, and it needs to happen very, very quickly. Stop that! Stop that!
It threatened to dominate her year.
The Queen has pretty remarkably, always managed to stay above and out of politics. It must have been awkward, difficult, and very unwelcome to have been dragged unwittingly into Brexit.
The lack of agreement over a deal to leave the European Union meant the anger and protests grew and grew. The Queen found herself presiding over a divided kingdom.
This went on and on and on, and the country and families and communities were deeply divided right down the middle. The monarch was the unifying force.
Throughout her reign, the Queen has always kept out of politics, and she would have been determined to do the same with Brexit.
The Queen has been extremely careful to keep her personal views on Brexit very, very close to her chest. No one knows what the Queen thinks of Brexit.
But as far back as 2016, before the actual vote itself, there were claims the Queen had given her view on the referendum.
It's vital to her that she is apolitical, that she's politically neutral. She has been dragged into the Brexit argument. She was on the front page of The Sun not long before the actual referendum date. It was said that she was anti-EU.
Headlines like that are an absolute no-no in the royal household.
The story was supposedly leaked by two inside sources who claimed the Queen had been critical of the EU at private royal functions. The headline was later found by the Press Standards Organisation to be unsupported, after the palace filed a complaint, the first ever by a reigning monarch to the British press.
The thing that probably makes the Queen or her advisors more anxious than anything else is any hint that she, the constitutional monarch, might be drawn into a political controversy, a party political controversy, especially if it's a very fierce one.
3 years on, and the Queen would find herself at the centre of the Brexit debate once again, shortly after Boris Johnson became the 14th Prime Minister of her reign.
We saw a new government in 2019 determined to push things through, determined to take no prisoners, determined to, as the quote went, get Brexit done.
The British people have had enough of waiting. The time has come to act, to take decisions.
They did that by announcing that they were going to prorogue Parliament, close Parliament down for longer than expected. They needed the Queen's permission to do that. Now, within our constitution, if the government of the day asks the Queen to do something, within reason, the Queen is expected to follow those orders.
The Prime Minister's shutdown of Parliament was hugely controversial.
The trouble is, with this particular request, there was so much controversy surrounding it, legal and constitutional, that an awful lot of people, including the opposition leaders, criticised directly the Queen's role in this.
If she'd refused him, that would have been political dynamite. And I suppose they decided they would go with what they thought was the sort of course of least resistance.
The Queen accepted Boris Johnson's request for a 5-week break in Parliament.
This is the oldest Parliament in the world. He's stopping it so he can force through his unelected ideas.
The flames of Brexit were licking around Buckingham Palace itself.
But within days, the Supreme Court ruled the prorogation of Parliament had been illegal.
The decision to advise Her Majesty to prorogue Parliament was unlawful. This means that the order in council to which it led was also unlawful, void, and of no effect, and should be quashed. The prorogation was also void and of no effect.
It was a terrible moment, really, for the Queen, not only to be dragged into that argument, but also to be dragged into the court decision that it was illegal, because the whole principle of constitutional monarchy is that the Queen takes her Prime Minister's advice.
Boris Johnson and Jacob Rees-Mogg, the leader of the House of Commons, were accused of misleading the Queen.
Did you lie to the Queen when you advised her to prorogue, to suspend Parliament?
Absolutely not. We need a Queen's speech. We need to get on and do all sorts of things.
So they wouldn't know what they were talking about. It's normal functioning of our constitution.
Since the prorogation was ruled unlawful by the Supreme Court, very clearly she would have been very displeased with Johnson as a result.
The decision was reversed, and Parliament reopened after just 15 days, 3 weeks shy of Boris Johnson's original request.
My Lords and members of the House of Commons, my government's priority has always been to secure the United Kingdom's departure from the European Union on the 31st of October.
There was some embarrassment around the monarchy in that it had accepted this advice from the Prime Minister that it was fine to prorogue. So the 9/10 of the egg was, I think, on Boris Johnson's face, but maybe there was a bit of splatter on the palace's face as well.
Away from Britain's most politically charged debate in decades, the Queen was also having to face controversy involving a former Prime Minister. In September, David Cameron released a tell-all autobiography detailing what happened in one of his private conversations with the Queen.
The Queen's weekly meetings with her Prime Ministers have always been completely private. I mean, even Prince Philip is not present.
One of the book's revelations referred to a conversation regarding the Scottish referendum in 2014.
Today, David Cameron stands accused once again of indiscretions after revealing he sought the monarch's help to head off Scottish independence in 2014.
It was grossly irresponsible of the then Prime Minister at the time, David Cameron, to reveal afterwards to sell his memoirs, apparently, that he had requested that the Queen, as he put it, raise an eyebrow to help the vote to remain part of the United Kingdom.
Cameron later divulged the details of the conversation in this revealing BBC documentary, watched by millions.
I remember conversations I had with my private secretary and he had with the Queen's private secretary and I had with the Queen's private secretary, not asking for anything that would be in any way improper or unconstitutional, but just a raising of the eyebrow, even a quarter of an inch.
This wasn't David Cameron's first breach of the Queen's confidence.
He even said to the ex-mayor of New York, Bloomberg, that the Queen had purred down the line to him after she'd heard of the result of the referendum.
David Cameron did later apologise for his indiscretion.
Of course, we can all understand the temptation to tell other people, tittle-tattle from what's gone on within those audiences, but the system crumbles if you give in to that temptation. And certainly my understanding is that the Queen was very, very unimpressed when he did leak some of the details of those conversations.
David Cameron's actually got a lot to answer for, I think, not only in regards to the position in Brexit, but also in regards to the fact that he broke confidentiality with the Queen in regards to Scotland. I mean, this is such a sensitive topic and we really expect our politicians to behave in a way that is professional at all times.
– 2019 will go down as one of the most difficult years of all for the Queen, full of political crises and family scandal. Coming up, how will she steady the monarchy and unite her country?
The Queen, I'm sure, would want to end her reign feeling that she had left the monarchy secure. At the moment, that road ahead is looking a lot rockier.
The past year and beyond has seen the royal family struggling, perhaps like never before.
Listen, the Queen has had one of her toughest years ever in her very, very long reign.
If you think about the last year for the Queen, her favourite son letting her down immensely, causing the royal family a huge amount of negative headlines and anxiety, I think she must feel devastated.
And 2020 has continued the Queen's streak of bad luck. After the bombshell of Megxit came more family woes, with the breakdowns of Peter Phillips and the Earl of Snowdon's respective marriages.
As if the Queen didn't have enough divorce and division going on, Peter Phillips, who is her eldest grandchild and the son of Princess Anne, has also split from his wife, as had the son of Princess Margaret. I think these would upset her very much.
When he got married, Peter Phillips embarrassed the Queen when he proudly appeared on the front page of Hello magazine.
Most people don't know much about him, but one thing that most people do remember is that when Peter and Autumn sold the rights of their wedding to Hello, the principle of having a royal wedding commercialized in this way was absolutely scandalous, and it will never happen again.
And Peter has continued to pursue a more commercial lifestyle. Just this year, he fronted this glossy milk advert in China, another source of embarrassment for the palace.
我爱喝娟山鲜牛奶.
His most recent advertisement for milk for a state-owned dairy farm in China is rather bizarre.
This is what I drink.
You cannot do those sorts of things. But they're in a problem, you know, they have to earn a living, they don't get money, and they are in a sort of neither here nor there. They're not ordinary people and they're not active members of the royal family. It's very, very difficult.
He is not a working royal. It's up to him to make money as he sees fit. But he might have considered the context in which most viewers will have seen this advertisement and have thought it pretty tacky.
The events of the last year have left the royals in crisis. But even if it means putting country before family, the Queen seems determined to restore the monarchy's reputation.
I definitely think that the Queen has gone through such a battering over the years. She's 93, she's a granny.
The Queen, I'm sure, would want to end her reign feeling that she had left the monarchy secure. She had played her part in steering it onto a safe future path. And at the moment, that road ahead is looking a lot rockier than it has done.
I think this is now the time for the monarchy to look deeply at itself and to think in a fundamental way, which maybe it hasn't for 100 years. What is the monarchy's style that is appropriate for Britain and indeed the Commonwealth in the 21st century?
It's a difficult situation because a lot of younger people can't see the point of the monarchy. Older people think that it's a great institution and highly respected. So I think it's a little wobbly, but the royal family has been going for hundreds and hundreds of years. I think we often say this will be the end of the royal family, but so far it looks as if it can overcome with time and sensible ruling from whoever is king or queen.
In the public eye, we are starting to see much more of William and Kate, and really much more of Charles and Camilla. So I think that right there is the new Fab Four.
The Queen's programme is balanced so she is able to perform her duties with the necessary adjustments. The way this is being handled has been very successful. The way the Prince of Wales and the Duchess of Cornwall have handled their engagements, and the way also William and Kate have handled theirs, shows that the inner core of the future monarchy is in safe hands.
Throughout all the problems her family and her country have faced, the Queen has remained dedicated and devoted.
The Queen is still firmly in control. And I think for somebody of her age to still be in control, particularly now that she no longer has her husband by her side, helping her with these decisions, doing the summits, taking the decisions, telling Harry what he could and couldn't have, I think is a sign of great strength.
And she is as popular now as ever.
I think in 2020, you see a nation, you see a world who have so much respect, love, and affection for Queen Elizabeth II. She will make sure that the House of Windsor, its succession, is safe and that there is much to look forward to.
I think people love the Queen because she's always there. She doesn't go off on exotic holidays. She never has done. So you know that you look out of the window, you think, oh, it's raining. You think, oh, well, it'll be raining over her too. And I think she's always there. You can look to her in times of trouble. And there's this continuity and this feeling of safety around our monarchy.
For the Queen and the royal family, the last year has been one to forget. From Prince Philip's ailing health and his car crash, the scandal engulfing Prince Andrew, the rift between Harry and William, plus, of course, Megxit, and the controversy over Brexit. It has been one of the most challenging periods of her reign. But the Queen remains as resilient and dutiful as ever.
You know, if you look at the reign of the Queen, she is the stable figure. Nearly 20 years ago, she had that disastrous year where everybody was either separating or divorcing or affairs were coming out. And there was the Queen putting it all back together, making sure everybody is and was okay. And you kind of think, okay, she's always such the stable figure in this royal family. Thank goodness.
I think ironically 2019 will only add to her legacy, that when looking back at her, we'll see somebody in their 90s who had a whole series of unexpected events happening, and yet she remained calm and dignified and was the grown-up in the room being the United Kingdom.